Hi there, my name is Randy Fay. I'm the maintainer. I'm one of the maintainers of the DDEV project, and I want to give you a tour today of DDEV on Windows Subsystem for Linux, WSL2. Uh, DDEV has supported WSL2 for a number of years, but it's just gotten better all the time. And in our latest release, we even have an installer that installs it all the different ways that you can use. So I am going to go ahead and step through that. First of all, let's just make sure that you might not be familiar with DDEV. DDEV is a Docker-based local development environment. It's mostly for web developers, but it does all of the web things for you. It does Node and NPM, and it does PHP. It does all those things for you in a predictable, containerized environment. PHP and Node developers use it. HTML developers use it. It can be used a lot of different ways. You run the website on your own local computer. There's basically no configuration of the computer. And you can run many projects or websites at the same time, and each one can have a different configuration. And your team can share that configuration, check it in. Because Docker does the lifting, you don't have to even have anything like PHP or Composer on your host computer and deal with those complexities. And DDEV has been around for quite a few years now, and it's had first-class Mac, Linux, Windows, and WSL2 support for really quite a long time. It works the same on every platform. WSL2 is a real Linux kernel, and the instances of that of the Linux distribution built into all supports, all versions of Windows. This is an amazing thing that Microsoft would do this, and they've been working at it now for, it must be almost 10 years, and they've done quite a good job. It's a different world, but it's right there in Windows, and it's quite good. And after all these years, the level of maturity is quite excellent. Nothing's perfect in any context, but it's great stuff. So let's just talk about the WSL2 advantages and disadvantages. I love WSL2, but I'm a Linux guy from way back. So for me, it's having my favorite Linux right there in the midst of a very mature and wonderful GUI operating system. So that's great for me. So on the advantage side, it gives me Linux with all the tools and power of Linux right there available to me anytime. With DDEV, it's got great performance and web serving, and you're working with an environment much like where you'll deploy to. So it is worth working in an environment that is like your deployment environment. Of course, DDEV already does that for you inside the container, but for you to work inside to use the command line with Linux tools is a great benefit because that's where your website will be deployed. So the disadvantages. Number one, it's the same thing. You've got Linux on your Windows machine. You already had 1,000 and 1,000 and 1,000 things to learn and remember, and now there's a whole different context with Linux. So, and those context switches between the Windows side and the WSL side, and the fact that there are two different file systems is, it's extra complexity. So it requires learning and patience with yourself while you learn it. And the third thing is because the WSL2 or the Linux file system, it's called ext4, is so much better for web serving and really better for anything that is a lot of files. And you really have to work in the WSL2 file system. And all of the standard editors are perfectly capable of doing that. So you can use your favorite Windows editors, but you need to use them against the WSL2 file system. Microsoft built, oh, good old NTFS for Microsoft Word for huge files, a few huge files, and not for web apps. But I'll show you how to do that as we go forward. So let's just take a look at the docs, at what we're going to do here. There's a quick doc, and there's more extensive docs. But what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Get Started page, and we're going to go through all the things on my machine, which is pretty close to not having anything on it. I skipped the part where I would have to reboot so that we could have a little continuity. So let's go take a look right quick at the Get Started page here. So here's our Get Started page, ddev.com/get-started, and we're going to choose Windows here. And here's the process that we're going to do. We've got 3 steps basically here. We're going to do a WSL-install. Then we're going to install an Ubuntu distro that is got the name DDEV. Ubuntu, by the way, is a classic distribution of Linux that has been around, it must be close to 20 years. That is very, very well maintained and stable and very widely known. So that's why we prefer it. There are other ways to do other things, but we're trying to keep you on the straight and narrow here. So then we'll take a look and make sure that we've got our new distro going. Then we're going to run the DDEV installer. We'll download and run the DDEV installer, and then we will create a project in there. So that's the steps that we're going to do. So let's go ahead and do those. I'm going to switch over here, and I'm going to open up the Windows terminal running PowerShell. It doesn't really matter what you're running here, PowerShell or CMD or Git Bash. They'll all work the same. We're not doing anything particularly exciting. We're going to do a WSL-install, and that did an escalation. Had I been doing that for the very first time on this machine, after it did the install that we're looking at here, it would force me to reboot. And that's the part that we happen to be skipping in my case. It also sometimes gives a bit of a bogus error message saying that it was missing some component because it's waiting for a reboot. So this has installed now the WSL2 component with the current version, and now it's getting the distro. But if I remember right, it's not going to know what to do with the distro, and we're still going to have to install the Ubuntu distro ourselves. No, it didn't do that this time. It depends on the state of your machine, whether it does that. I'm going to set my local user here. I always use RFA. And let's see if I can type it correctly. And so there I am, and you'll see that it landed me in the machine, in the freshly created machine here. I don't really want to be there. I'll show you this in a minute. I'm going to do what we suggest and create one called DDEV. Because of the state of my machine, it was able to just automatically create the Ubuntu distro without the other processes. So I'm going to say WSL-install -name. Let's see, we're going to say Ubuntu -name DDEV. So we're going to just create one named DDEV. And the name doesn't matter. It's just to, if you have more than one, for whatever reason, that may help you to remember which one is which. So we're just doing the same thing again that it automatically was doing with the Ubuntu distro. And then we're going to delete the other one because we don't need it. Okay, and it landed us in the Windows home, which I don't really want it to be, but I'm going to exit out of there. Now I'm going to do a WSL-L-V, and we're going to see that we have two distros, and they're both version 2. If you see a version 1 there, then something has gone terribly wrong, and you would do a WSL set default version 2, and then you would have to recreate. So, but that version 2 is the default. So if you're setting up WSL these days, it's there and it's already the default and all those things. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set my DDEV one to be the default. Just makes things slightly easier. And now you see the star is on DDEV. And now I'm going to get rid of the other one with an unregister command. And we only needed the one. So there we are. We have a DDEV distro. I am going to close this PowerShell and open Windows Terminal. Windows Terminal, if you haven't seen it around, it's now a standard part of Windows, and it's really quite an excellent step forward. And when you install a distro, you automatically get the things that you really need. So it creates a new DDEV entry there. So I can just pop that, and that's my favorite thing to use for accessing the distro. And you'll notice that when it opens a distro, it opens it in the home directory, which is where we want it to be. So right now, this distro doesn't have much on it. And so the thing that we're going to do is we're going to run the DDEV installer. So let's go and we will go to github.com, DDEV, and we'll go to releases. And we'll get the latest one. We are on an AMD 64 Windows machine, which most of you are as well. And so we want the DDEV Windows AMD 64 installer for the latest release. So I'm going to get that one. And then we're just going to run that install. So it did elevate. It did a UAC prompt to give us privileges to do this install. And now I'm going to go, and you see we have 3 choices here for the DDEV installation type, and we'll talk about the other 2 choices right now. We do recommend the Docker CE approach and WSL2, but the others are totally valid, and we'll talk about those toward the end of this session. So we've only got one distro right now, so it's only offering us one choice here, and all the normal things that one of these does. And it's going to go through, and it's mostly spending all of its time configuring that that distro that we installed. We can actually watch it do it here. It's installing the required Linux packages, downloading them, installing them. These are things that we used to have a fairly complex PowerShell script to do that was a little awkward to run. And now these are done by the installer for you. So it takes, actually the first time you run this, it has to download and install everything. But after that, your distro has most of the things in it, and you can rerun this. You can do an upgrade with it. You can rerun it as many times as you want, and it does no harm. You can run it on the same distro again and again, and it does no harm. So there we go. On the last page, you see that we have a checkbox here to say, consider consider visiting our support page. So we will do that. We do need your support. DDEV is a free and open source project with 2 people working all the time on it and a huge community making it happen. But we need your sponsorship and we want to become a sustainable project. So please do consider supporting it yourself or getting your organization to support DDEV. Now there we are. We have finished that installation, and now we're going to go and do a trivial install. So we're going to go back here to the DDEV distro. I'll just open it again. Here's the DDEV distro. Now we can see that DDEV is installed here and working, and Docker is working. So we have all the piece parts that we need to go forward. I always make my projects in a subdirectory called Workspace. A lot of people use a subdirectory called Sites. I recommend you use a lowercase s for that if you do. What we're going to do for our first round is we're just going to create a very, very simple PHP file and turn that into a project because it shows you very quickly what we need to do. So I'm going to create a project called I'll call it test. I always use junk personally, but I'm going to use test for this one. And I am going to put in there a file. I'm going to put a PHP file in there. Well, actually, I'm just going to put an HTML file. We're just going to put an index.html. DDEV is very happy to have an index.html. Now I'm going to do a DDEV config, and I can use just the defaults here. I could have done a DDEV config -- auto. Now I'm going to do a DDEV start, and it's going to ask if it can do the usage statistics and such. We'll say yes, and now it has to pull the images that it needs. This process of pulling the images is usually not very annoying. We are doing this from scratch the very, very first time, and so it's getting those. But the next time we go to a project that uses the same images, which is usually all of our projects using the same images, it doesn't have to download those. Those are now on your machine. So even though this looks like a bit of work the first time around, it's not that bad because every project is sharing the images, and so it works out. It works out fine. We can get going pretty quickly. Of course, if you're on slower internet, this will be slower than my downloads here, and you can have a cup of coffee. This internet doesn't let me have that cup of coffee for the downloads. Okay, here it is. It's done. I'm going to do a DDEV describe like it says, like it suggests. So here are the basics of this project. Here's the main URL, test.ddev.site. The Docker platform is WSL2 Docker CE. Um, there are details about the individual containers. And of course, we can access our project uh, four different ways. One is via the HTTPS, trusted HTTPS. One is via the direct to the web the web IP address and port. And then we can also use HTTP. And sometimes there's a reason to do that. I'm going to use the regular HTTPS, so I'm just going to say DDEV launch, which is how most of us do that most of the time. And you see we now have a page here with our index.html, and our URL is a trusted URL because DDEV in the install process installed all the things that we need for that, and we have a valid certificate that the browser trusts here. So we have created a truly trivial little project by doing that, and there we are. So now I would like to do so we've just done all the things. We did a whole project, we made a whole project, it's running, and we have it in front of us. Now I'm going to do a slightly more complex project. I'm just going to do a Drupal 11 project because that's what's in my fingers. And I'm going to do a DDEV config. And this is all, let me just show you here the many ways that that you could do whatever you wanted to here. Here's a section in the docs called CMS Quick Starts. You can just search in the search for Quick Start. And you see, look at all of those that are just examples of what can be done. These are maintained examples that have automated testing. But there are many other uses of DDEV that are not listed here. Lots of people use it for lots and lots of things. But these are the ones that have a recipe listed here in the Quick Start. And I'm going to use the Drupal 11 recipe here. So I'm going to do a DDEV config -- project type equals Drupal 11 -- doc root equals web. I could have done this manually, but I usually just type in the things that I know because I do it often. And now I'm going to do a DDEV composer create project Drupal / recommended project. So this is using composer create project under the hood to do all the things that you need to do to get a project going with Drupal 11. There are obviously many ways to do this. I could have checked out a project. In fact, I do that often. Or we could do the composer method, which is what we have here. Composer create project happens to start the project. So there it is. It's already done. And now if I do a DDEV launch here, I can actually go through the process here. And I'll just do that. Usually I would use Drush at this point to do a very quick install, but I will do a manual install here using the web UI. You see that it's already configured with the database and things like that. That's a convenience feature that DDEV provides, that it does it provides automatically all of the database configuration and that kind of thing for you. Okay, we'll just fill in a couple of things here. And in this case, we don't need updates. So we will save it, and there's our project all set up for us, which is it's a great thing to have a project to just experiment with here, and this is fully functional project here. So we'll use this project in a couple of minutes for demonstrating Xdebug. So I wish you were here right now because I'd ask you if you have any questions, but let's switch back and see how much I left out of our presentation. So what we did was we did a WSL install, and on my machine that accidentally created a distro called Ubuntu that we didn't need. We did a WSL update to make sure we were on the current version of WSL. Then we created a distro named DDEV, which is what we've been using, where we were working just in right here is where we were working in a distro called DDEV. It's an Ubuntu distro. So you can see that this is an Ubuntu 24.04 distro, and we ran the Windows installer, and we basically chose the defaults in all the cases there. So that was our experiment that we just did. So here's the junk project that I didn't do. I did a test project, and then here's a typo 3 example. I did a Drupal example instead. And then I do want to show you a couple of things that you can do so that you're familiar with some of the tools that are out there. There are many tools, but if I just go DDEV, you'll see that we have a whole bunch of commands that you don't have to know all about. We have, I can do a DDEV, let me just do this. I'm going to do a DDEV export db -- file equals .tarballs db.sql.gz, and that will save our database into that file. I can do a DDEV snapshot, and that will create a database snapshot, which is a binary image of the database. I recommend that you keep snapshots of all your projects because you never know what can happen on your machine. And these are regular files instead of the Docker volume where these things are usually stored. DDEV describe, we already showed. Always very useful. DDEV list shows you your projects that you have. We have 2 projects, a Drupal 11 and a base PHP project. What else did I promise to show you? Stop, power off, MySQL, snapshot. When you want to stop a project, let's go back to the test project, and I'm just going to say DDEV stop. And I could have from anywhere said DDEV stop test, and it would have stopped the distro or the project name test. So that now is stopped, and it shows it is stopped. I can. One of my favorites is DDEV MySQL because I'm familiar on the command line, so I can do a show tables here. What did I do wrong there? Oh, I didn't. Had a typo. So I can just do a quick set of things like that. But DDEV has any number of other database browsers. A lot of people really like to have a GUI database browser. And if you just search for database in the DDEV docs, it'll link you to, there must be 7 or 8 different browsers. There's one for every taste. And the PhpStorm and VS Code integrations that we will look at in just a moment also have database integrations. So there's all those things. And then a DDEV power off. DDEV power off shuts off all of your sites and all of your and any of the supporting containers like the router and the SSH agent so that everything is stopped. So okay, so I'm going to start that one back up again and we will move on. We've got, so it's worth exploring those various tools. There's many of them there. Okay, now we're going to do PhpStorm, and we're going to connect up to this project and take a look at the files, and then we're going to turn on Xdebug and listen for it. So I'll see if I can do this correctly. It's possible that I won't be able to because I was fooling with it already today. So let's see how we do. And I already had a distro when I was fooling with it called DDEV. So I'm going to, here I am in PhpStorm, and I want to open. And the way you open in most apps is in this Finder or Picker window, we will see that there's Linux down here, and we want Linux, and we want DDEV, and we want home. And one of the first things that I'll show you in just a second, I usually make that a favorite, but we're working on D11. D11 is the folder that we're going to use, and you'll see that PhpStorm knows how to navigate that and has worked all of that out. It wants to exclude the folders, so I'll say sure, you can do that. And it did an elevate in order to do that you couldn't see, I don't believe. And it's been doing all the things that we want it to do. Let me just show you what I was saying here. If I go into the Windows Explorer here, and I go to Linux, DDEV, Home, RFA. Oh, here, I want to just be in Home. I like to drag that into my favorites very early when I'm working with something. So I'll bring that over here and maybe put it right, not there. Oh, it's got to go up higher here. Sorry. So I'm going to bring it right over here. You see, I've already got an RFA for a different one, but we're going to go here and we're going to take Workspace and bring that over here into the favorites as well. And we'll bring our test project, our D11 project, over there as well. So we'll have quick access to those. And now that will be available anytime we're doing an open in any tool that we're using, any editor or anything else. So, okay, so we have it open now. We have our files, all of them. So here's the web and the index.php. And I can edit and work on these all day long, and I can use the Git facilities of PhpStorm, and I can use the terminal. Here's the terminal. You see the terminal has already got, this is already using the terminal inside WSL2, inside our distro. So we can do it DDEV describe here and do all the things that we need to do. And now I'm going to demonstrate, if you're with me this far, you're probably already familiar with PhpStorm. So I won't demonstrate all the features of PhpStorm, But the next thing that I want to do is install the DDEV plugin because it's really very nice, very well maintained. We'll go here into settings and we'll go into plugins and go to marketplace. And DDEV, and this is the one that we want right here. And I don't know for sure if we have to turn off to stop and start PhpStorm here, but you'll see that the this DDEV detected is coming from the extension, and that's showing us all the things. I don't know what the checking PHP installation is, what that message is, or where it's coming from. But it looks like it's done. There we go. So the extension went in and found that DDEV had PHP 8.3 configured, and we are set with that. So the extension does all the setup. The setup can be done manually without that as well, but it works really very well. And it sets up our, there's not really anything to set up, but it does what we need to do with Xdebug and that sort of thing. So what I'm going to do now is just demonstrate visiting a project with Xdebug going. So we will set up here, if I can get to it, from my tools. I have to get these tools out of the way or I can't get to it. Here, let me just try this. There we go. I'm going to say start listening for PHP. So this is the way Xdebug works, is that the IDE listens for a network connection, and then the code, the PHP code, contacts the IDE to tell it what's going on with debugging. So on the IDE, we told it to listen. Now let's make a breakpoint here, and I am going to do a DDEV Xdebug on to tell DDEV to start doing its thing. And let's remember what our project is. Our project is d11.ddev.site. So I can do a DDEV launch, for example, or I can just visit in the browser, either way. And you see that it launched it here and it's sitting there. And why is it sitting there? It's sitting there because PhpStorm got the message, stopped at the breakpoint, is showing us the variables that are available there, and it is ready to go. So I can now step through. I can use an F8 to step through. I can use a F7 to step in here and step through all of my things. And there I'm set. So PhpStorm was awfully easy to set that up with. I'm going to use an F9 to say go ahead and finish this off. All the things that we needed to do were done. So that's how Xdebug works with PhpStorm, and that's how PhpStorm works in a WSL2 environment. So let's go ahead and do the same thing now with, we'll do the same thing with VS Code. So I am going to exit here. And now I will try with VS Code. Let's just see what our situation is. So we have a fair starting place. I might as well do an DDEV Xdebug off. Xdebug doesn't cost as much in performance these days as it once did, but most people turn it on when they want it and turn it off when they don't want it again. So let's go ahead and do the same thing now with VS Code. So the way you start a WSL2 instance in VS Code is in your project. Here we are in the D11 project. In your project, we do a code dot. That's basically saying VS Code, launch a VS Code that understands WSL2 using the current directory. So that's installing the VS Code server. There's a very easy way to pop this up, and now it's running it here with the regular Windows side VS Code interface that we need. So now we need to include a couple of, this is a clean, more or less clean. We'll see how clean it is. We need to install a couple of extensions here. So let's get our extensions. I imagine it's already got the WSL because that's how it works. And now we need the PHP extension. The PHP debug extension is what we're going to need, the official one. Unfortunately, it's very confusing how many different ones there can be, but this is the one from xdebug.org. That's the one that we want. So we'll get the PHP debug and we're going to install it in our WSL world as well. So we want that. And then let's get the DDEV extension. So it's the DDEV manager that we want. This other one, you see the old logo. We don't know the history of that one, but it is obsolete. So we're going to take the DDEV manager and install that in WSL. I don't know what happened to our PHP debug. Let's see. WSL is required to open the remote window. Okay, we got the DDEV manager. It looks like we got, oh, here we need the PHP debug. We need that installed in WSL. Okay, that looks like it. Probably good. Now let's go use I don't have the same amount of experience with VS Code as I do with the JetBrains IDEs, so I may stumble a little bit here, but let's go to the Explorer. We're doing here exactly the same thing as we were doing elsewhere. We can go to the install.txt, we can go to the index.php here, and here's our index.php. And this is saying that the PHP executable path isn't set, but I think our DDEV extension should have done that for us. Now let's see what happens here. I'm going to just set a breakpoint just like we did in PhpStorm. And I'm going to use the terminal here. So terminal works exactly the same. Let's get rid of this. And you see that the terminal is working very well. It's also, again, in the distro. And do DDEV list, DDEV Xdebug on. And so now in VS Code, we have to tell it to run and debug. So we'll say run and debug, and then you have to say listen for Xdebug. And there it is. You see this orange bar down here is the indicator that it is actually listening properly. I find this a little awkward having to click here and then to click here, but we'll do that. And now we're going to do the exact same thing. Um, we'll go back and in the terminal, we'll do a DDEV launch. It's the same as just visiting the page on the project. And you see it paused here. It's waiting to load. It would have been long since done loading, but the VS Code wants to run. Well, it stopped on our breakpoint. And up here are the variables that are running at that point. And again, here we can use the, hang on, let me just pull this down just a little bit. We can step in to a function call. We can step over a function call. And it shows it has little hints there, F8, Shift F8. You can do all the things that you would expect to do with your debugger. So, and both PhpStorm and VS Code have database capabilities and all kinds of other things. And they do Git for you. I don't approve of that. I'm a big, huge Git from the command line person. I'm a big believer that you know more what's going on when you do that, but that's for another time. But both PhpStorm and VS Code will do Git for you and do all the things. And let's see where we are now. So we just did, without any incident, we just did VS Code. So there was our PhpStorm step debugging. Here's our VS Code step debugging. And we installed the extensions that we needed. We did the code dot, did a DDEV Xdebug on, did the VS Code listen thing, and we visited a page and it stopped, which is pretty stinking cool. So, okay, let's go back and just talk about a couple of things that you might have questions about. You have heard about Docker Desktop for years now. And so what about Docker Desktop? DDEV has supported Docker Desktop on both traditional Windows and WSL2 for many years, and it works fine. The installer, as you saw when we went through the installer, it was offering both of those. Docker Desktop is commercial software, and it has a very specific license agreement, and your company may need to pay for you to be able to use it. They're very strict about it. And Docker Desktop, unfortunately, is not really very stable. It seems to have new bugs in every release. So compared to Docker CE, which is Linux-based and very, very well maintained by the same company, I might add, this is a company that we are very indebted to. Docker Inc. maintains all of these wonderful open source tools that we depend on that are components of every Docker provider. But Docker Desktop is not their finest hour. It's focused on a lot of things that are not just doing the jobs that we need to do. So Docker Desktop is fully supported if you would prefer to use that. It's a little more complicated than what we just did, but not much. And then what about traditional Windows? So traditional Windows is just the label that we give of if you're working on Windows and the regular Windows NTFS file system. We just call that traditional Windows as opposed to the various WSL2 approaches. And we've supported it for many years. The performance is not as good as with WSL2, and there's some initial startup sync time on a project that you may or may not find troublesome. But in reality, it's not bad. It used to be terrible. It used to be just, when we first did WSL2, traditional Windows was something that you would never want to do anymore because WSL2 is so much better. But now that traditional Windows has mutagen support, it's actually tolerable. And some teams use that deliberately because their teams are familiar with Git Bash or PowerShell or CMD, and so they do what they need to do there. So there was a time that we were threatening to deprecate this approach, and we have about 5% of our users that are on traditional Windows, and they're very defensive about that. So we won't do that anymore. Plus, it works a lot better than it used to. Okay, so let's just take a quick look at what we did. Make sure that we know what it was. So we talked about what DDEV is, what WSL2 is on Windows, and why we'd want to use it. The advantages and disadvantages, which are almost the same thing. You get Linux, you get Linux. We did the install, which is just 3 steps that shows on ddev.com/get started. We installed WSL on our machine, which is just a one-time thing. And then we ran the installer, and then we created a project. That's what we did. So here's the dummy project that we did. And we demonstrated some of the commands. Then we demonstrated accessing a WSL2 project from PhpStorm and doing Xdebug on it. And then VS Code accessing it, which is a little different, using the code dot approach from inside your distro. And then we talked about Docker Desktop and traditional Windows. And here we are with the resources for you. Obviously, ddev.com has all the things and pointers to all the things, but one of those things is the DDEV docs. And in there, you'll find the WSL2 install docs in more detail. There's a great Drupal.org tutorial on all this. And don't forget about the Microsoft docs at learn.microsoft.com. And we would love to have you join us for support, discussion, learning from you, discussing the problems that you have and everything else in Discord, on Stack Overflow, and the DDEV issue queue. And our project repo, of course, is github.com/ddev/ddev. So join us. We would love to have you. And thanks for hanging with me today.